Hey, all right, Joe 58. It's Friday, and today is July 7th, and we're making it work. How's that sound? We're going to go over some of the final components of the biological aspects of stress. We're going to hone in on this section on diabetes. Do not fear this, okay? You guys should know all about this. First of all, it's really important because diabetes is really the number one chronic condition impacting the world right now, and it has, like I said, so many trajectories in terms of your health. So we're all good on that. I just wanted to put this up here. That was day one, okay, and she's doing great. And just want to let you know it's all good. And they basically ramp up the treatment. They start with kind of slowly titering in the monoclonal antibody to take out her B cells or antibody producing lymphocytes. 100 milligrams yesterday over about a 6-hour period. And then they just sat there and monitored, make sure that she was tolerating it because it is a foreign protein. And so what happens is sometimes you'll mount a immune reaction against that protein. And part of that immune reaction could be a major allergic reaction. And they don't want you to kind of go into allergic shock, and which she didn't. And so today they ramped it up to 900. So it was 100 milligrams yesterday, 900 milligrams today over about 6 hours. And so it's game on. And she's very tired because to guard against the allergic reaction, the histamine reaction, what they give you is they give you a bucket load of Benadryl. And as you know, anybody has taken antihistamines, it's the over-the-counter sleep aid, and it makes you kind of drowsy and sleepy. So there you go. Awesome. So thank you guys for all your messages and concern. And so it's game on for me on this one, the right shoulder on Monday at about 10:45 is when he's going to start doing the cutting. So and I'm sure I'll do fine. All right. Okay. So just again a heads up. Okay. So the your journal paper is due on the 10th. Okay. Just have fun with it. That's the bottom line. You've seen if you go in there, you can see, and a lot of you've already submitted to me. You just create a study. Okay. And you can make it more review article if that's up your alley. But we did show you a couple of examples right here. It's kind of fun for you. It's a good chance for you to get to know Excel and how to chart data. But the key is the routine and the format of the paper. Right? All right. So you guys will figure it out, and you're going to do fine. You guys are master's students. All right. Let's go into this week's assignment. Okay, so as we've marched through, we've talked about stress, and we saw the good and bad of stress. Okay, it protects us against extreme conditions behaviorally. We also during high stress conditions, it's actually the first thing we do in terms of kind of wound repair. But you have to make that an acute thing. Okay, so I'm going to be highly stressed out on Monday. And it serves its own purpose, okay? But chronically, it can be a problem, all right? We went into then the epigenetics of it right here, okay, and how we're turning on and off genes that could be harmful. And a lot of you guys did some really good work on that, talking about some of the good and bad that can be turned on in terms of different genes and how that can be carried on. And the only way you're going to turn it back is to change behaviors, all right? Alrighty, so then we did the intro to the diabetes, okay? We talked about diabetes being a risk factor for vascular disease that can lead to problems. And we also talked about cortisol, how it degenerates the parts of the brain that can lead to depression, degenerates the parts of the brain that can lead to dementia, and then you combine that with the diabetic effect that can happen long term. We're talking, over a lifetime, guys. We're talking having really, really poor psychological health over a lifetime, and how that can impact your overall brain health. Okay. All right. So we're going to go into here, go a little deeper into the vascular disease and diabetes. The next lecture that we're coming up, we'll be talking about the direct effects on the immune system. And that's a whole field of specialty called psychoneuroimmunology. And then we've been hinting at approaches to make yourself better. and we'll talk more about that. It's in the second half of the course, okay? All righty, so let's just go right into this right here. All right, so we can see I've already posted a video. It's not my video, but it's another John. And John goes through the litany of complications that can happen if you don't manage your type 2 diabetes, okay? And it all has to do with the blood vessels, specifically the arterial system, your vasculature that's delivering the blood. And the arterial system can get atherosclerosis, okay, which causes basically a decrease in the inner diameter of the arterial system, leads to high blood pressure, okay, that will then beget more atherosclerosis, okay. And then importantly, wherever you have those atherosclerotic plaques, you're going to have tons of inflammation. And the inflammation then bleeds into the tissue where the artery is going, and it causes that tissue to not work as well. All right? So, and where is this going to all happen? It happens in the biggest arteries with the highest speed of blood flow. Okay? Coming right off here, here's my heart. When it pumps, you have this big giant blood vessel called the aorta. So it gets problematic. Straight off the aorta is the carotid artery. Okay, so you have a left and right carotid artery. The left one is a little bit bigger, a little bit more blood flow, more problems there. Okay, we have the coronary arteries that come right off the aorta, go right back up in the heart because it never stops working. So those guys get the atherosclerosis, okay? And the other one that's a big one is the renal artery coming down here, okay? So those are some of the immediate effects. And a lot of people that are diabetics have to go into dialysis because their kidneys die off because of the disease that has happened in their renal artery. The other things that can happen, okay, is the blood vessels to the eyes, okay, can go south, and you get what's called diabetic retinopathy, where you go blind, okay? Same thing, it's atherosclerosis, okay? The approach to remedy that is to try and get rid of the abnormal blood vessels in your eyes. And then the other thing that can happen is with a diabetic, you can get deep vein thrombosis, and as a result, your immune system does not get down there and attack infections as well, and people then can get lesions in their lower limbs and actually have complications where you have to actually remove toes, feet, legs, etc., like that from amputations. All right, so really cool video to watch right there. All righty, so then we go in here and we're going to talk about some of the basic physiology. This is an amazing online textbook all about diabetes. It's a chance, especially if you have a family history, a friend, you work in a facility where people have diabetes, which there's a pretty good chance a number of your patient clients will have diabetes. This is a good way to have an understanding of what's going on, okay? We'll go through each of the hormones that they talk about, okay? I relate it back to stress, okay? Cortisol, okay? And then growth hormone is another one that gets elevated when you have overnutrition, okay? And that pumps out what's called IGF-1, okay? This is the whole Walter Longo story, and many other researchers, Walter Longo being our researcher from the Andrews Gerontology Center, and causes abnormal overgrowth that can lead to damage, okay? In addition, cortisol, growth hormone, and other obesity-related problems, okay? There's no bigger inflammatory tissue in your body than visceral fat. So it releases a bunch of immune-activating cytokines, okay? The famous ones are TNF-alpha. Humira goes after this. IL-6, okay, that's called interleukin-6. That is a drug that is targeted with Actemra. If you've ever heard of these drugs, okay, and these are cause again problems with diabetes. Okay, there's changes in hormones as well. When you have a lot of fat, the free fatty acids, the cytokines, and all the disrupted fat hormones lead to insulin receptor insensitivity. So we have up here, stress does it, growth hormone will do this, and then these other compounds do this as well. So, and this is all can be connected here, the growth hormone and everything I said down here, to obesity, and stress can create obesity, okay? And stress unto itself has its own problem. All right, so that's kind of the background. It all comes down to, there's a figure right here that when insulin binds to its receptor, it inserts this special channel into your muscle cells. It opens and it allows glucose to go into the muscle cells, so you can use it to create these big abnormal looking guns like this one, okay? So if you don't have insulin receptor sensitivity, what happens is insulin binds here, but this is inactivated by the actions of cortisol and all the other factors that we put that I listed up here. So you don't get this inserted up here because of problems that happen internally from all these agents right here. All right, no transporter, the glucose doesn't come in, you feel tired, you feel weak, okay, a sign of diabetes. Glucose is elevated inside the blood, okay, which means you're going to pee it a lot, okay, another side of diabetes. You're going to have lots of thirst, another side of diabetes, okay, on and on and on. And then the worst thing in terms of your inflammation is that elevated blood sugar coats proteins with glucose, and that triggers inflammation. All right, so this is all there's an entire class to be had on diabetes, which I can't do right now, okay, but I'm exposing you guys to it. So you can see right here, this is all the opportunity that you can look into all the different aspects of diabetes. It's an amazing online textbook, guys. So if you have any questions, I encourage you to kind of search around. We're going to go over the hormones right here that regulate our blood sugar. When you're fasting, all right, when you get up first thing in the morning, let's say you didn't have a meal after your dinner at 8 o'clock at night, you're going to be releasing hormones that are going to go to your sugar reserves, and the storehouse for your sugar reserves is in your liver and to a small amount in your muscle cells, okay? So your skeletal muscle cells. So this is glucagon, okay? So glucagon is going to go to the liver and say, hey, release all that stored sugar, okay? When that stored sugar is done, if you're still fasting, then it tells the liver, hey, turn some of your protein, okay, into sugar, okay? So there you go. So now you have these sorts of sugar. If that's not enough, then you begin to burn fat, okay? Alrighty. If you are in fasting state too long, okay, you begin to develop these ketones, and it's okay to burn ketones, but if you get to a point you don't have any nutrition, then you have to be careful, as in that you can ketones are a very acidic compound, and you can go into acidosis. That's called ketoacidosis, which has some life-threatening effects. So you got to manage your fasting accordingly. Okay, awesome. All right, so glucagon is going to raise blood sugar, okay, and it's going to do so by removing the stored glucose from your liver and from your muscle cells. Here's another one, right? This is pretty famous right here, okay? GLP-1 and GIP, okay? So it's glucagon-like peptide 1, okay? This guy is released from your gut, okay? Alrighty, it's very famous, okay? We'll scroll down here, we'll take a look at it. Why is it so famous, okay? What happens with food coming into your intestines release GIP and GLP-1, and it goes to your pancreas and says, I want you to release, because the pancreas senses glucose, okay? All right, so it goes to the pancreas, okay, and specifically your beta cells, and it says, I want you to release about 5 times the amount of insulin, because guess what, there's a meal coming in right now. So it's a way of signaling the pancreas, there's a meal coming in, glucose is following, we need to pump up our insulin release, okay? When you're fasting, now you're releasing glucagon, okay? But when there's food around, okay, it shuts off the glucagon that's going to be released, and it causes an increase in release of insulin. Insulin then travels to the liver, okay, and it says we're going to decrease glucose production. In fact, we're going to store it now, all right? All right, so that's how that works, okay? And the goal then is to take the glucose out of the bloodstream, okay, and package it away, all right? So that's what it says, because you're always, feeding and then fasting. With feeding, you gotta store it away, all right? and when you're fasting, you got to release it back out. Okay. All righty. So that's how that works. Okay. So why are these guys so famous? Okay. These are not only excellent ways to manage diabetes because you're pumping out the insulin. Okay. But it also reduces appetite. Okay. Yes. What are these guys? Okay. I put a list right here. These are your GLP-1 agonists that originally, okay, developed for the treatment of diabetes, but now are the big new fad for weight loss. Okay. Trulicity, okay, right here. Ozempic, Victoza, Bisbalius, Wegovy is not listed here. All right, they all are different versions of the same type of molecule. And what's unique about these guys, okay, is they are a small protein, okay? Again, they're a small protein that is released, I think was it over here? Yeah, released by your gut, okay, gets into the blood and does its thing, okay, augments insulin, and it goes to the brain and says, you know what, you just had a meal, it's time to slow your roll, all right? And that's the important part. It also feeds back to the intestine and slows the motility, okay? And that is the movement of food through the intestines so that you can absorb your nutrients better, okay? It makes you feel full when you have slower motility. So it all helps to reduce the appetite. And so, like I said, it is a small protein called a peptide. So you cannot take that in pill form because what does our stomach/intestines do? It digests proteins into amino acids. And so taking a pill is going to be no good. They're developing a pill that's resistant to that. You will resort, so you'll absorb it, okay? And that is the new way. So right now, people that, as you know, that take this, you have to inject this once a week, okay? So you do an injection, it gets, you put it into your subcutaneous fat, the blood then pulls it out of the fat, and then it gets distributed to the brain to shut off your appetite, and it helps lower your blood glucose, okay? All right, so that's how that works. Alrighty, here's another compound right here, okay? Amylin, okay? Amylin is also released by the beta cells, okay? It has kind of a similar effect as GLP-1, okay? It feeds back the increased insulin production, okay? And it goes to the brain and said, you know what? We just had a meal, okay? So let's slow our roll, okay? Again, it's a compound that you cannot take in pill form, all right? All right, so that's what those are all about. We scroll down here, okay? And we look at other types of hormones that are gonna regulate our blood glucose, okay? Here it is, okay? The adrenaline rush, okay? In the United States, we call it epinephrine. In the UK, we call it adrenaline. It's the same exact hormone, okay? When are we gonna release adrenaline or slash epinephrine? When you're stressed out, okay? You need to fight or flight. All right, so what it does is it increases the contraction rate of the heart. So it increases your respiratory rate. You can keep going. It redirects blood flow to the brain and muscles. This is all good. So these are all so you can run, okay, or fight or whatever you got to do, okay? And in addition, it goes down to the liver, okay? And it says, just like glucagon, it's time to release glucose into the bloodstream, okay? It's all good, all right? Because you're running. But if you're stressing out psychologically, you're not going to be using it up, and you're going to be releasing all that glucose into the bloodstream that can cause them problems, okay? Like I said, it candy coats many of the proteins. The immune system flips out when you have too much glucose on these proteins and causes inflammation. Okay, so there's a purpose, but not psychologically elevating it all the time. Okay, so when we get down here, okay, we're looking right here. This is like, for example, this could be my liver cell. This could be my bicep muscle right here. Okay, so when I release insulin, I want to pull the glucose. See, the glucose is the little light blue hexagon because that's kind of the structure of what glucose looks like. Okay, and so what happens is when insulin binds to this receptor, it causes the transport of this protein that will then open up and suck the glucose into my muscle cell, into my fat cells. All right. and you then store it up. So we have a reserve of glucose. So if I contract my muscle, it gets released right away from my muscle cells, okay? And then we store it for long term as fat in our fat cells. And so once you've burned through all of your glucose reserves, then you'll start burning fat, okay? All right, problem, okay? We see right here, we have these, so with overnutrition, too much growth hormone, too much IGF-1, then this will reduce the sensitivity of this system because it blocks the insertion of this transporter. What else do we see right here? Cortisol, the stress hormone, okay? It also blocks the sensitivity of this receptor long term, okay? Long term. All right, so so you're not going to get as much of this protein out there. You're not going to be able to store the glucose as effectively, and triggers inflammation. Okay, um, when you are morbidly obese and you have lots of visceral fat, okay, there are fat hormones that will do the same thing. And like I said, there are the famous cytokines of tumor necrosis factor alpha and interleukin-6. There are a whole slew of other ones that do similar things, but those are the most famous ones that also do this dysregulation. Okay, alrighty. So I encourage you to go ahead and check out the quiz. Okay, this is called the self-assessment quiz. Okay, you just go right into it right there, and then you can go through this. Okay, and see how well you do. All right, this is not going into your grade. This is their system. All right, so that's what I encourage you to do. And I also listed the quiz right down here. There it is, self-assessment quiz, okay? All right, so once you've done that now and you've talked to John and you found out all these complications, and you can dive in, become an expert. This is a great resource right here to look at the diabetes-related conditions, okay? Heart disease and stroke, okay? Because of the atherosclerosis that forms in your large blood vessels going to your brain and to your heart, okay? So what then happens is you get inflammation, okay? The atherosclerotic plaque grows and grows and grows and grows, so the diameter gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and then part of the plaque can fall off, and then that causes what's called an ischemic episode, all right? That floating bit of debris, okay, clogs the arteries, okay, and you can have a stroke, you can have a heart attack, you can have blocked renal arteries, you can have blindness from that, on and on and on. Okay, all right. So so this is a great resource to learn about that. It also comes down here. We can talk about the problems that happen to the eyes, diabetic neuropathy, kidney disease, diabetic nephropathy. Okay. I'm sorry, neuropathy is what happens down in your distal limbs. Eye disease is retinopathy. So this is where you get nerve damage in your toes and your feet, and so you don't feel the pain, and it also makes it so you have trouble walking later on because you don't get the feedback. Okay, so that's the neuropathy. Same problem though, has to do with abnormal inflammation. These are the foot problems. We have anywhere there's a blood vessel, we have on and on, all these different problems. Yes, diabetes is also linked to cancer. So you can go through all these and check them out. And I encourage you guys to do that, okay? Awesome. Okay, and this is different, of course, from the traditional, I mean, the other type of stroke or problem in terms of blood vessels would be hemorrhagic. Okay, when you have vascular problems, you have an ischemic episode, you can have a balloon that forms. Okay, so the atheroma is causing the clogging. A balloon can form from the high pressure and it bursts, and that's hemorrhagic. So there's two different types of blood vessel problems that come in from that. Okay. Okay, all right, so that's kind of all I wanted to go with there, through there. I just want you to go in there and check it out and become an expert on that. All right, then we finish up right here, okay, linking it back to stress, okay? So this is the original article that I downloaded from the American Heart Association, and then that article is transcribed here in Science Daily, so you can go right in here, okay? And look at this study done in 2014, but what was really unique about this study is that what they were doing is they were looking at monitoring levels of stress, hostility, and depressive symptoms, and looked then down the line if they were associated with an increased risk of stroke or a small heart attack called a transient ischemic attack. And they followed these people out for a fairly long period of time, for about 10 years, okay? So that's what this, it talks about this. It talks about the participants. There are almost 7,000 adults. This was the age range, which was pretty broad, okay? You see that the sex difference was pretty 50-50, okay? They looked at participants that over lots and lots of ethnicities. We see that we about 40% were white, almost 30% were black, 12% Chinese, and about 22% were Hispanic, okay? At the time when they initiated the study, everybody was free of cardiovascular disease. You can do things like a calcium scan and do other measures to make sure that they're free, okay? They then looked at their psychological tests, okay, and asked them, are you depressed, okay? Do you have high levels of chronic stress? Do you have lots of hostility, okay? And you can see here that people that were significantly clinically depressed were almost twice as likely to have a stroke or TIA. 60% more likely to have a stroke or TIA if you had high chronic stress. And we see down here that you were 2 times more likely to have a stroke or TIA if you had lots of anger and hostility, okay, which has the amygdala going off, all right? Pretty significant stuff, okay? They did not look at coping strategies, okay? That's something that they want to kind of do down the line that we'll talk about later. And they, when looking at this, did not see, this study was specifically looking at stress and saying yes or no. They didn't see any differences in terms of the stress effects when they looked across different ethnicities. So there you go. So it was a pretty cool study and it's something to think about. So what you then do, guys, okay, you do your quiz and then you relate this all back to your discussion right here, all right? That's today's lecture, and peace. And we're going to do psychoneuroimmunology next time. All right. And until then, you take care.